Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm very excited, very excited. I'm not just saying that because I'm the host, but I'm very excited to be part of this thing tonight, this historical, unprecedented debate. It does not matter what side of this debate you fall on. Tonight you will be informed and empowered to make your own decision. My name is Mr. Outcourage. I'll be your host tonight. I'll briefly explain what Mr. Outcourage is. Most of you hopefully have heard of the word encourage, which means to give courage. I happen to believe that all of the courage that you need to accomplish everything that you need in life is already in you. All it needs to be is untapped, released, thus the word outcourage. Write that down. It's a new word for you. Tonight it really is my honor because I do a lot of training on political and economic empowerment. And right now, we are at a time in America where people need to be informed. Information empowers you, and we don't just need to be empowered, we have to act on what we know. So once you're informed tonight, whatever side of the aisle you fall on, please get active. Tonight, it's my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed moderator for tonight, Adam Simons.
Let's give a hand of applause here.
Please put your hands together for our esteemed moderator, Adam Simons.
Okay, Colleen.
Hello. Good evening. I would like to introduce you to my boss for over 8 years, Dr. Howard Farran. He's a practicing dentist for 25 years, a local businessman, a pillar of our community, and a father to 4 boys who were born and raised in Phoenix. In 1987, he graduated from the University of Missouri School of Dentistry in Kansas City, Kansas. He moved to Phoenix and opened his dental practice, Today's Dental in Ahwatukee. Dr. Farran was overwhelmed by the rampant decay he saw in his patients' mouths, and he concluded that these dental cavities were due in part to no fluoride existing in Phoenix water supply. Dr. Farran, along with the help of 2 other outstanding dental professionals in our community, dental hygienist Karen Christensen at Phoenix College Dental Hygiene School, and Dr. Jack Dillenberg, the dean of the local dental school in Mesa, A.T. Still, spent more than a year in making it their mission to optimally fluoridate the city's water supply. And this motivation was to improve the dental health of not only his patients and his 4 boys, but for every single citizen of Phoenix, Arizona. And that mission was a success in 1989. Additionally, in 1989, Dr. Farran won the Arizona Department of Health Services Dental Public Health Award for his efforts in fluoridating the city of Phoenix. Dr. Farran provides a huge relevance to tonight's debate because he has been on the forefront of the fluoride topic for all these years, continues to stay educated and educate others on this very topic, and maintains a full-time dental office here in Phoenix, Arizona. Please give a warm welcome once again to Dr. Howard Farran.
Okay, Melissa.
It gives me great pleasure this evening to introduce Dr. Paul Connett, PhD, retired full professor of environmental chemistry and toxicology at St. Lawrence University in New York State. He obtained his PhD in chemistry from Dartmouth College. For many years, Dr. Connett held the prevailing American view that people opposed to fluoridation were scientifically ill-informed. At his wife Ellen's request, he studied the primary literature on fluoridation for 14 years. His perception dramatically changed. He is the director of the Fluoride Action Network. He is also the co-author of the book, The Case Against Fluoridation, How Hazardous Waste Ended Up in Our Drinking Water, and the Bad Science and Powerful Politics That Keep It There. Dr. Connett will take the position opposed to fluoridation. Welcome, Dr. Connett.
Thank you.
All right, Adam, the stage is all yours.
Good evening. I am the Director of Debate at Arizona State, and it's my honor to moderate this debate tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the format of the debate that you're about to see and what you'll witness. To open, Dr. Farran will have a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation, the case for fluoridation of the drinking water, followed by a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation by Dr. Connett. After this, you'll see 2 7-minute speeches by each speaker, each with a 3-minute question and answer period. After that, we'll have a series of 4-minute speeches. We'll have a second round of question and answer, followed by each speaker summing up their position. So without further ado, I bring Dr. Farran to the stage to give his first presentation.
It is an extreme honor to be here tonight. This is a, they say the only thing new in life is the history you haven't learned. And going forward for the next thousands of years, hopefully we can relearn painful lessons from the past without repeating them. Hopefully we can learn about them in literature and movies and documentaries. And hopefully tonight, I want everyone to remember that a mind is like a parachute and it only works when it's open. So I really hope that you hear us out. I got started in water fluoridation. I went to dental school at the University of Kansas City in Missouri, and I graduated in 1987. And to become a dentist, we had to do, 15, 20 root canals and 75 fillings, pull 50 teeth, 15 dentures, all this stuff. But one of the criterias was 2 root canals on a baby tooth. And that's called a pulpotomy with a chrome steel crown. And it was an almost impossible requirement to get. I mean, you just couldn't find one. And some rich dentists had retired and paid for a bus to go around to the low-income schools. And every Tuesday, the Reinhardt Foundation would bring in busloads of kids, and we'd all sit there drooling, hoping we'd find our 2 baby root canals. And it literally took till last semester of senior year of dental school to find this. And I was lucky that I found it. And then I graduated May 11, 87, opened up my practice September 21, 87, 25 years ago, right here in the southernmost part of Phoenix called Ahwatukee. And I was just stunned. And I opened up with my dental assistant, Jan, who's right there in the 3rd row, who's still with me 25 years later. And I was stunned. It was like every 5th child that was 2, 3, 4 years old needed a root canal or 2. And I was just sitting around just stumped, and I couldn't figure it out. I mean, I felt like, what did I miss in dental school? What's the difference in Kansas City and Phoenix? And so finally, I called the Office of Dental Health, and Dr. Jack Dillenberg was there. And Jack, you have been my public health mentor since day one. He's the dean of our local dental school. He's an absolute legend. And he introduced me to Karen Christian, who then was the director. Where's Karen? Who was the director of the Phoenix Hygiene School. And so Jack looks at me and he says, well, Howard, he goes, this is one of the largest, if not the largest, unfluoridated city in America. And he started turning me on to all this research. And I got married, and I had 4 baby boys in 60 months, and this meant a lot to me. And I started to get depressed that I was going to be sitting on an assembly line, drilling and filling and billing, drilling and filling and billing for 40 years and not make an impact. And I knew to have meaning and purpose in my life, I needed to have a meaningful impact on the community. And Jack was my inspiration, Karen Christian was my inspiration, and he turned me on to the head dentist at the Centers for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, the American Dental Association. Jack's Rolodex, that was before computers, he just had drawers of Rolodexes. The guy knows everybody. He lectures around the world. And so we got together and we started a meeting with city councilmen. And it took about a year. And what city councilmen did is we were just their errand boy. And they would, a constituent would say, well, what about I got a little small dog. So we would chase down the research from the Arizona Veterinary Association, the National Association. People would say, well, what about citrus? What about my citrus trees? So we would track down research. And we just answered all of their questions with tons of peer review research. And after a year, they finally brought it to a vote. and they voted in 8-1, and Jan and I were talking about this all week today. Within, what would you say it was, Jan, about a year or 2 years, it was just massive, obvious. I mean, 2-year-olds coming in needing root canals, pulpotomies, chrome soul crowns. I mean, it just pretty much vanished. And it was just an unbelievable event. And to think that what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to relearn the history lessons we learned 20 years ago by repeating the lesson. We don't want to take iodine, another element. It's not a medication, it's just an element. It's one of the 92 naturally occurring elements on the earth. We put that in salt and we got rid of goiter. I bet there's not one person in this room that knows of someone with goiter. We put vitamin D in milk and rickets were gone. You know what vitamin C actually stands for? Citrus. You know the first medication ever discovered by man? It was a British Navy physician. Every time the Navy ships came back, 20-30% of the people had scurvy, and it was horrible. And this physician noticed one time that one ship came back with no scurvy, and he knew there was a variable there. And the only thing he could find was this barrel of limes. That's why they called British Navy people limeys. And he said there's something in there. He didn't know what it was, but it was citrus, and he called it vitamin C. And then he begged the king, the next time you send out the ships to sea, let's put half of them with citrus limes and the other half not. And they finally did this experiment, and scurvy was gone. So scurvy was cured by citrus or limes or vitamin C. So basically, my boy Ryan, Zach is there. Thank you for coming, Zach. I have as much at stake as this. I got 4 baby boys. I'm proud to say now at 50 years old, I got a grandbaby now, and that's fantastic. And I care as much about those 4 boys. I care more about them than myself, just like most parents do. And I have not taken this debate lightly. I have been staying up on fluoride literature since I got addicted to it from Jack back in 1989. And I couldn't even tell you how many fluoride studies I've read, but it's probably all 5,000 of them. So what is community fluoridation? Water fluoridation is the precise adjustment of fluoride that already occurs naturally in the water. We keep hearing arguments like, well, people have diabetes and you don't put insulin in the water. Insulin is not an element. It's not. We're not talking about a medication. We've never found a water supply without fluoride. It's the 13th most common element of the planet. It shows up in the ocean at 1.5 parts per million. Now, I have a pet peeve of mine when people say planet Earth, because I think it's kind of egocentric and narcissistic, say planet Earth, when Earth only covers 30% of the planet and the ocean covers 70% of the planet. Half the species of life live in the ocean. We know, if you believe in evolution, that life has been evolving in the ocean for billions and billions of billions of years. And when they worked out all those evolutionary metabolic pathways, it was dependent on a bioavailable source of 1.5 part per million fluoride in the water to build stuff. Now, when you talk about building a sugar or a carbohydrate, you're just talking about 3 atoms, right? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. If you want a protein, you got to add nitrogen. But you can't build a human or Shamu the whale with just carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. If you're going to build teeth and bones, you're going to need some fluoride. You're going to need some calcium. You're going to need some phosphorus. You're going to need some trace elements of a lot of stuff. And what's interesting with nutritionists is when they actually work out how much you need, you can actually trace it back to what has been in the ocean at 1.5 part per million. So we're talking about Phoenix. Naturally, it comes out at 0.3. The ocean's 1.5, and we just want to barely bump it up to 0.7 so we don't have to go back to the horrendous decay we had. There's what you call planet Earth. With the correct view of the Pacific Ocean, you can't even see the Earth. There's a little Australia down there and a little land. But that's planet Earth. The cartilage formed by sharks, I have shark jaws in all my operatories to show children perfect teeth. Shamu the whale is a mammal like you and me. Dolphins, they have beautiful teeth, and there's a close-up of their teeth. I remember when I took my kids to SeaWorld the first time, everybody was amazed at the enormity of Shamu, and I was just freaked out looking at those teeth. I was in like the 3rd row. I about dove over the fence I wanted to just get as close as I could. So we go back to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. They said that there were 4 elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. And then years later, we worked it up to 92 naturally occurring elements. They've artificially created larger elements than that. But fluoride is on the right side. And fluoride, of course, reacts with everything on the left side. It would react with hydrogen and lithium and sodium, everything over here. I do think one thing that's a little different about this debate that surprises me is everybody talks about fluoride in the water. But you know what? Chlorine is in the same family right underneath it. And do you realize that right now on planet Earth, 4.5% of all death last year on planet Earth, 7 billion people, was from diarrhea from dirty water? I mean, would you really consider taking chlorine out of the water? I mean, forget fluorine. In fact, if we could only pick one, fluoride or fluorine or chlorine, I would take the chlorine. Cholera, it's a tremendously horrible way to die of diarrhea. And you could say now that now we know that fluoride is made out of 16 different quarks and string theory, and the knowledge just keeps going and going and going, and it was very fun. In 1989, we were reading research from 1945 to 1989, and it's been fun reading this research because now we got research that's 2 decades longer than the research we originally have. And there's a fluorine rock, if you want to know what fluoride looks like when it comes out of a mine. You'll hear a lot of talk that it's a waste product out of a mine. Well, technically speaking, everything that comes out of a mine is a waste product. But yes, it comes out of a mine because where else is it going to come out of? It comes out of planet Earth. It's a naturally occurring element. We have half the planet is oxygen. Now, I want to tell you about toxic doses. Everything is toxic at a certain dose. The atmosphere is 20.9% oxygen. You remember when incubators first came out? I bet Stevie Wonder remembers, because they thought, well, if 20.9% is good, let's give these babies 100%. And Stevie Wonder was put in a little incubator, and it burned off all the corneas of his eyes. And he's blind to this day. In fact, the million-dollar question is, if he wouldn't have been blind, would he have just sat at that piano and been the greatest piano player of all time? So yeah, oxygen is half the planet, but it's toxic. If I drank 8 liters of water right now on stage, I would drop dead. Silicon is the next largest element. And sure enough, if you've had silicone breast implants, that was a bad idea. Then we had aluminum. We had iron. Look at calcium. Everybody talks about how much important calcium is. But if you drank a bottle of liquid calcium, you'd be in the emergency room. Look at potassium and sodium. Potassium only comes from plant matter, and it takes 4 potassium ions to pump a sodium ion out of each one of your 1 trillion cells. We call that the potassium-sodium pump. We tell Americans only 1 gram of sodium a day and 4 grams of potassium a day, but the average American does it reverse. They do 4 grams of sodium, 1 gram of potassium. That's why all their cells are bloated. It changes their metabolic pathway. The Mayo Clinic up the street did a fantastic study on high blood pressure that showed that if you can get your sodium to under 1 gram, your potassium over 4 grams, 92% of high blood pressure goes away without medication. So I'm very, very cognizant of toxicity. You don't want to eat a bar of magnesium or hydrogen. Fluoride doesn't even show up in this chart. Throughout more than 65 years of research and practical experience, the overwhelming available scientific evidence has consistently shown the fluoridation of community water is safe. Now, every dentist and physician I know, when we look up research, we go to PubMed. PubMed has nearly 6,000 studies on water fluoridation. People keep telling me, well, it's never been studied. There's never been a double random controlled study. There's never been this. They've never compared it to that. I mean, they have other things they want to work on. Trust me. They've done 6,000 studies. They've done them around the world, Canada, England. And then another thing I notice with studies when I see anti-fluoridation studies, it's always a study that isn't quality enough to get published on PubMed, number one. Number two, it's never from the United States. 75% of Americans are fluoridated, 25% aren't. 25% aren't because there's 117 towns over 100,000. They're pretty much all fluoridated. But there's 19,033 towns that aren't fluoridated. They got smaller water supplies. They don't have the budget. No one got involved. But, you would think if there was any research to shown, why can't you show me one from America where there's 320 million sample subjects, a quarter without, 3/4 with? Why do you have to go to China? I just lectured to dentists in China a month ago at the World Dental Forum. And I was in Hong Kong, and then I went into Shenzhen. That is an environmental atrocity. You thought there was like a fire burning. Is there like a fire or a forest fire or what's going on? Oh no, that's just smog. They burn open coal. Coal comes from under the ground. God only knows what's coming out of the coal. It's unbelievable. So they'll point to a study And it's not in English, and it's not in China, and it's not in PubMed. But what you have to do, I can assure you as a dentist, that I can find a study to disagree with every single thing I do. When you're talking about doing a root canal, what you have to learn is, okay, here's the body of the literature. Oh yeah, there's an outlier here. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe they set up the experiment wrong. Who knows what happened? But with the scientific method, it needs to be repeated time after time after time. And if you look at the 6,000 water fluoridation studies, when you're talking about the level found in the ocean or less, there's no problem except a little bit of fluorosis, and we'll talk about that later. Look who recognized the public health benefits of fluoride. The American Academy of Pediatrics. I know there's people worried about what about making infant formula with powdered milk and water. They completely endorse it. So does the ADA, the American Medical Association, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I've been there in Atlanta a dozen times. They have a $8.5 billion budget with 15,000 employees, and all they do, everybody wants to bring down disease. And from 1900 to the year 2000, in that 100 years, the average American lives 35 years longer. And they attribute just about 10 things, and one of them is water fluoridation. One of them is vaccinations. One of them is seatbelts. One of them is worker safety. One of them is cracking down on tobacco. Even your Parent Teachers Association, the World Health Organization, every reputable international scientific community endorses this. Am I out of time? Can I just go for just one more hour?
Thanks, Dr. Farran. We'll now recognize Dr. Connett for his opening presentation.
I'm just going to take the time, if I may, from when there it comes. Okay. Good evening. First of all, a big thank you to Dr. Farran for agreeing to do this. It's a very rare moment in the history of my experience. In 16 years, he is the third dentist who's had the courage to come out and defend his position in a public debate. And I thank him very much for doing that. I also applaud all those dental students who have their little outfits on. Thank you for coming. Let's hope you too have the courage to change your mind if you hear evidence tonight that makes you think again. Our hope is with the future. Our hope is with young people who won't make the same mistakes as their elders, especially in the dental field. Now, I've spent 16 years researching the fluoridation issue, first as a professor of chemistry, specializing in environmental chemistry and toxicology, and now as the director of the Fluoride Action Network. The research effort culminated in October 2010 with the publication of this book with two other scientists, James Beck, an MD, PhD from Calgary, and Spenny Micklem, a doctor of philosophy from Oxford, a biologist, a physicist, and a chemist. Every single argument in this book is documented with the scientific literature with 80 pages of scientific references. And what has been the response to our book from the fluoridation people? After 22 months, there has been no scientific response to our book from promoters of fluoridation. And yet, they still continue to maintain that science is on their side and repeat their mantra that fluoridation is safe and effective. Now, a summary of the key arguments. Fluoridation is a poor medical practice. It's a poor medical practice to use the water supply to deliver medicine for obvious reasons. Once you put it in the water, you can't control the dose, which is very important. Secondly, you can't control who gets it. It goes to babies, it goes to infants, it goes to sick people, it goes to elderly people, it goes to people with impaired kidney function, people with low iodine. It's ridiculous. Ask a pharmacist if there's any drug in his store that he can give to anybody in any dose. It's preposterous. And then we come to the ethics. What you're doing is forcing medication on people without their informed consent. There are people in this room who do not give their informed consent to this practice, but it is forced upon them. Fluoride is not a nutrient. You just heard Dr. Farran talking about iodine. and vitamin C. These are nutrients. To establish a nutrient, you have to starve the animal of the substance in its diet, and if it's a nutrient, it develops a disease. They've never done that with fluoride. They've never shown a disease accrues because of lack of fluoride. But fluoride, on the other hand, causes many harmful effects. It's extremely active biologically, interferes with enzymes. The fluoride level, he talked about the levels in the sea, the levels of the background levels and so on. The average is about 0.1, incidentally. So you're adding water, fluoride here, 7 times the average. But just because something occurs naturally doesn't make it safe. Arsenic occurs naturally, doesn't make arsenic safe. If you want to look at a level, an indicator of what's natural and what's safe, look at mother's milk. Mother's milk is very low in fluoride, 0.004 parts per million, which means that a bottle-fed baby in Phoenix is getting 175 times more fluoride than a breastfed baby. Fluoride interferes with the infant's growing tooth cells, creating damage to the enamel, a condition called dental fluorosis. According to the CDC, 41% of US children aged 12 to 15 now have dental fluorosis. Remember, the original promoters of fluoridation anticipated 10% of the kids in its very mild form. According to the CDC, black and Mexican Americans have higher rates of dental fluorosis than whites. Pan Dembeston, one of the experts in the world experts on dental fluorosis, said, "We can certainly see that fluoride impacts the way proteins interact with mineralized tissue. So what effect is it having elsewhere at the cellular level? Fluoride is very powerful and needs to be treated respectfully." And that was a quote from Scientific American in 2008. It's reckless, in my view, to assume that when fluoride is damaging the infant's growing tooth cells, it's not damaging other developing tissues. Several lines of evidence indicate that fluoride can damage the brain, and I'll discuss that later, and other tissues as well. The benefits of swallowing fluoride have been wildly exaggerated. Even fluoridation promoters now concede that fluoride's beneficial action is topical, not systemic. It works on the outside of the tooth, not from inside the body. When you swallow it, you only get risk. You get at least dental fluorosis and any other tissue that's harmed on the way. On the other hand, if you want to get the benefit, put it on your teeth, brush it on your teeth with fluoridated toothpaste, and then spit it out. Now, this phenomenon that it works topically, not systemically, probably explains why you cannot find a difference in tooth decay in 12-year-olds, and this is based upon World Health Organization data, whether the country is fluoridated or not. You get the same rates of tooth decay in 12-year-olds today in the non-fluoridated countries, which are way in the majority. Most of the people drinking fluoridated water live in North America. It's very much an American phenomena. You're the odd men out. The chemicals used to fluoridate are not pharmaceutical grade, but are industrial waste products derived from the scrubbing systems of the phosphate fertilizer industry. One of the substances which inevitably is in that stuff is arsenic. Now, arsenic is a known human carcinogen for which there's no safe level. In other words, when you use these fluoridating chemicals, you are going to increase the cancer rate in the United States. There's no argument about that. We can argue about how big or small that increase is, but you can't argue with the fact that you're increasing the cancer rate, regardless of what fluoride does. Fluoride may also cause cancer. The science underpinning promoters' claims of safety and effectiveness is very, very poor. It's bad science. There's not been a single randomized clinical trial demonstrating either fluoridation's effectiveness or safety. That's the gold standard for epidemiology. After 67 years, we don't have a gold standard epidemiological study actually demonstrating this works. The FDA has never regulated fluoride for ingestion. It's an unapproved drug. and yet it's prescribed to more people in the United States every day than any other drug in history. In the 67 years since fluoridation began, there's been little or no monitoring of fluoride levels in the bone, blood, or urine of our population. Where harm has been demonstrated in countries with high natural levels of fluoride, there's been practically no attempt to reproduce those findings in the United States. He says, show me a study in the United States. Well, if you did them, we could look at them. But you're not doing it. The NIH is not financing the kind of studies that we are seeing in other countries. Instead of science, promoters use endorsements. You've already heard it today. The ADA will give you this long list of endorsements. These endorsements mean a hill of beans unless they're accompanied with a very thorough review of the science, which they usually are not. When the US government endorsed fluoridation in 1950, no trials had been completed, there were practically no health studies published, and yet the government endorsed it. And then all these agencies here, many of these rolled over like a row of dominoes, also endorsing it. Endorsements are not science. They're very effective from a public relations point of view, but they're not science. Now, the most frequent agency cited is the CDC. And hardly a day goes by without some journalist or editor or health official citing this quote: fluoridation is one of the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. Very impressive, very effective in the media. However, if you look into it, the report on which this statement is based was not externally peer-reviewed. It was written by two people, Scott Tomar, a dentist who'd never written anything on fluoridation before, and an economist, Susan Griffin. The report was 6 years out of date on the health literature, and their evidence of benefit was laughable. Here it is. This is their figure, the only figure in their paper. You see the blue line is the decrease of tooth decay in the United States from the 60s to the 1990s. And you see the red line on there? The red line is the percentage of the US population drinking fluoridated water. Voila! The blue line's coming down because the red line is going up. That's incredible. Now, what they could have done is to look at what's happening in the rest of the world. This is World Health Organization data. The top 12 countries are non-fluoridated. 1 has 10% fluoridation. 4 have fluoridation. And if you look at it, they're all coming down in that same period. Most of them are not fluoridated. And if you look at the tooth decay in the latest tooth decay, it's a wash. Now, one of the few examples of a review which involved a balanced panel was the National Research Council review of 2006, which I testified before. The review took 3.5 years, was 507 pages long, 1,100 references, but it's been largely ignored and dismissed by the ADA and the CDC. One of the chapters was devoted to fluoride in the brain. This is what they concluded. It is apparent that fluorides have the ability to interfere with functions of the brain. The NRC panel reviewed 5 IQ studies. One of them is close to my heart because I was invited by the author to go and look at where he did the study. I went to the 2 villages, one with fluoride less than 0.7, the other with a village between 2.5 and 4.5 parts per million. He controlled for lead and iodine and other key variables. He found a drop of 5 to 10 IQ points across the whole age range. The drop in IQ correlated with fluoride levels in the urine, which is a measure of individual exposure, and the whole IQ was shifted for both males and females. Here's the male ones. The black curve is the low fluoride village. The dotted mauve curve is the high fluoride village. The whole IQ curve has been shifted over. Zhang estimated that the threshold for lowering IQ was at 1.9 parts per million. Please note, an American child drinking 2 liters of water at 1 part per million would get a higher dose, 2 milligrams per day, than one of those Chinese children drinking 1 liter of water at 1.9 parts per million. And incidentally, there was no coal burning in these villages. There was no industry anywhere around. And from what I could see, there's practically no difference in the lifestyles of the 2 villages. More IQs. Now, that was 5 in 2006. We now have 33 studies published from China, India, Iran, and Mexico, which associate a lowering of IQ with fluoride exposure. Now, just recently, a meta-analysis was published by a research team from Harvard University, Choi and others, included Philip Grandjean, who's well known in environmental health circles. They looked at 27 of these studies. These 27 studies compared the IQs in high fluoride villages with low fluoride villages. And the study was published in Environmental Health Perspectives. That's the leading journal of environmental health in the world. It's published by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, which is part of NIH that promotes fluoridation. What are they going to do now? This is right under their noses. Now, 26 of the 27 studies found a lower average IQ than in the high village compared to the low village. And in 9 of the studies, the high fluoride village, so-called high fluoride village, the fluoride was less than 3 parts per million. That's unhealthily close to what we're doing. Now, Choi and others, they found, on average, a 0.45 standard deviation, a drop of IQ. That amounts to about 7 IQ points, which was highly significant. The Harvard scientists concluded that further investigation of fluoride's lowering of IQ should be a high research priority. The same conclusion that the NRC made in 2006, and nothing has been done. No studies have been attempted to reproduce these Chinese studies in the American context. If you don't look, you don't find. And don't assume that the absence of study is the same as absence of harm. It isn't. Now, Philip Grandjean said this: fluorides seem to fit in with lead, mercury, and other poisons that cause chemical brain drain. The effect of each toxicant may seem small, but the combined damage on a population scale can be serious, especially because the brain power of the next generation is crucial to all of us. And let me flesh that out just a little bit. IQ in a population follows the typical bell-shaped curve, the normal distribution. That means that you've got an average. Most people have the average IQ. Thank you. Just finish off this, if I may. Most have an average IQ, but look at the 2 tails. The green area is the number of geniuses, very bright geniuses in your society. The mauve area is the number of mentally handicapped. Now, if you shift that curve over by a little, you go from, for the average person, 100 to 95, a parent or a teacher would not notice that change. But look at what it does to the 2 tails. It halves your geniuses in your society and doubles the number of mentally handicapped. This is serious, folks. What parent and what government would put ahead a saving of a small amount of tooth decay, which can be saved, has been demonstrated in dozens of countries by brushing with fluoridated toothpaste, if you're going to risk lowering the brain power of your population? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Connett. We'll now return to Dr. Farran.
And how long is this section?
7 minutes for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes.
Is this going?
Can we keep the PowerPoint on?
Is this
Yep,
on?
We're good.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, first of all, I totally, Dr. Connett, respect your passion. I just want to say a few things since you went off on this National Research Council on the Harvard IQ study. This is a 550-page book with 1,100 references, and the exact study he's talking about IQ, let me just read from the book he quoted. And it says, and I quote, "The significance of these Chinese studies is uncertain. Most of the papers were brief reports and omitted important procedural details. For example, some studies used a modification of the Raven progressive matrix test, but did not specify what the modifications were. Most of the studies did not indicate whether the IQ tests were administered in a blinded manner. Some of the effects noted in the studies could have been due to stress induced by testing. Without detailed information, we just don't know." Another one that I loved is I actually have the study in my hand, and the thing that always bothers me about anti-fluoridationists is they never get a study from the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, and they're getting this data from cities in China and India and Iran and Ginzu, and I just went there. I just went to the World Modern Dental Forum And these Chinese studies, you can't find them on PubMed because PubMed has refused to index them for pointing out flaws. So, I mean, when you can't get your study published on PubMed, then there's something seriously wrong. And I went there, and what I found in China is they have more people than the United States. We have 320 million people. They have more people than that don't have running water, electricity, or sewage. Their coal-burning plants are atrocities. And you say coal not in a city. I mean, in 1950, the ocean had 1 part per million mercury. Now it has 4 part per million mercury. There might not be a coal plant in that town, but the smoke goes up and goes all the way across the Pacific Ocean. So again, I've been reading research for since basically 1980. And the one thing you have to do is research. When I'm doing a root canal, if everybody uses this, I can find a study against everything. And we always know who the studies are because advertisers always use them. They might do 20 studies on their product, and just one of the studies shows it was the best. So they kill the other 19 studies and advertise that study till everybody, they hear it so many times they believe it. But you have to look at the body of the knowledge. You have to look at the body of knowledge, and you need reputable studies. And when you're talking about something as sensitive as the thyroid, the kidneys, little children, things like that, there are literally a million variables going on. I mean, what are you eating? What type of genetics? We have 3.6 billion genes. What are your genes? What are you eating? Are you exercising? Are you smoking? And those need to be done in advanced countries so you can monitor 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 variables at once. Not just going in a town and showing, oh, there was high fluoride and we saw this. And again, the 10 greatest public health achievements of all time, vaccinations. I mean, there's a lot of talk about people, they just took mercury stabilizer out of vaccines without any evidence. They just did it because they were afraid the public was going to lose trust. And I get that. I get that. I'm a registered libertarian. I really am. And, but they took it out just because they don't want the public to lose faith. And now vaccines don't last very long before they're made to when they're injected. Motor safety vehicle, OSHA with workplace, control of infectious disease. And look how good of a job we're doing. 1990, cancer rates stopped rising. And look from 1990 to now. I mean, cancer is coming down. The top line is men, and the bottom line is women. That's why women live to be 74, and men live to be 79. And you need to look at the research. Like when people talk about hip fractures occurring so much more in women. Do you know why hip fractures occur so much more in women? Because we're all dead at 74. It's hard to break your hip when you're in a coffin 6 feet underground. So you really have to understand the research. Here's cancer deaths by men, women. He just said that these are just blind endorsements. The American Dental Association has 150,000 dentists. Studies conducted throughout the past 65 years have consistently shown that fluoridation of community water supplies is safe and effective. There's the American Dental Hygienist. Good scientific evidence supports adjusting the water in the fluoride in the water. There's the Academy of General Dentistry, the American Association of Public Health, the American Medical Association. These guys, there are 900,000 MDs and another 40,000 DOs. Really, we're all wrong? Really? Everyone's wrong? The American Academy of Family Physicians, the American Academy of Pediatrics, what's that? We have 5,000 studies. I'll just show you the studies I printed out just for tonight. Ask my boy in the front row. These are the studies I've just been printed out for you this month. I've been reading, I had a binder this thick 20 years ago with Jack. And this is the binder I printed out this month. We have 6,000 studies published on PubMed to anybody on the planet who wants to go on the internet. The problem with the internet is there's 300 million websites, and people they see something and they believe it. American Association for the Advancement of Science, International Agency for Research on Cancer. Look at this. Epidemiological studies have shown no association between fluoride and Down syndrome, cancer incidents. I mean, we hear all kinds of things. In Phoenix, people were saying to me, well, what about sickle cell anemia? Dude, we have found the gene. We have found the gene. People say Down syndrome. Can you believe they have to mention that it doesn't cause Down syndromes when we've known it's trisomy 21 for 40 years? 40 years ago, we knew the gene that caused, in fact, they call it mongoloid because in Caucasian round eye, the 23rd chromosome gets tricked up, and so you revert back to the epicanthic fold. So when they first saw Caucasians that were mentally retarded, they noticed they had Mongolian eyes, so they call it Mongoloidism. We've known this for 40 years, but we address everything that people say. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They have 15,000 people doing research all day, every day. There's C. Everett Koop under Ronald Reagan, if you're a Republican. There's Audrey Manley under Surgeon General under Bill Clinton. David Satcher again under Bill Clinton. The American Council on Science and Health. The Osteopathic Association. There's still people that think fluoride causes fluorosis. It's just, it's sad. And then they'll show a study. And this China study, the fluoride in the water was 11 times of that found in the ocean. 11 times. Now, again, if I drink 8 bottles of water, I would drop dead right now. I bet you could die if you ate 40 pounds of spinach. American Society for Nutrition. The Australian Dental Association, and show me studies from Australia, not Iran or China or and from areas of town that don't have running water, electricity, sewage, or an internet connection. The British Dental Association, I know you were born and educated in Britain. The British Dental Association endorses. So does the British Dental Health. So does the British Medical Association, the Canadian Dental Association, Canadian Public Health, Green Facts, International Association of Dental Research. Winners of Nobel Prize. Look what he says. This is a Nobel Prize winner. He says, opponents of water fluoridation off-label fluoride is toxic or poison. He says, in this respect, fluoride ion is similar to many other substances such as vitamin D. They are harmful in large amounts, but are required in small amounts for life and good health of human beings. The National Council Against Health Fraud, anti-fluoridationists who point out that fluoride can produce adverse effects deliberately fail to mention that the concentrations that produce adverse effects are higher than the concentrations produced by properly maintained fluoride systems.
That's time. Thank you, Dr. Farran.
Okay.
We'll now have a 3-minute question and answer period where Dr. Connett will ask questions of Dr. Farran.
Dr. Farran, do you know who Dr. John Doyle is?
I lectured at 40,000. No, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Dr. John Doyle was the chairman of the panel there, the National Research Council panel. And this is what he said in the scientific, yes, he was the chairman of that panel. And this is what he said in an interview in Scientific American. It says, what the committee found is that we've gone with the status quo regarding fluoride for many years, for too long really, and now we need to take a fresh look. In the scientific community, people tend to think this is settled. I mean, when the US Surgeon General comes out and says this is one of the top greatest achievements of the 20th century, that's a hard hurdle to get over. But when we looked at the studies that have been done, we found that many of these questions are unsettled, and we have much less information than we should, considering how long this fluoridation has been going on. So your 6,000 studies did not impress them too much. Now, what study has convinced you that we can ignore over 100 animal studies that shows that fluoride damages animal brain, 10 studies which shows fluoride changes animal behavior, 33 IQ studies that I've mentioned already, other studies, another 7 studies which show neurobehavioral effects, 4 fetal brain damage studies in China. What have you got to offer which says we can ignore all that?
My turn? Okay. You're an eloquent speaker. I didn't know the curtains closed or what. First of all, you're quoting a book that's 550 pages long that I've read, and a lot of people say I have a photographic memory. I say I have a photographic memory, but there's not always film in the camera. But you know, I wish you would have wrote it in the book, because in his book he says strong evidence exists that the prevalence of severe enamel fluorosis is nearly zero at water fluoridation.
Excuse me, you don't interrupt.
No new studies.
Excuse me, with respect, my question was, what gives you the confidence to ignore all these studies that I listed? Over 100 animal studies, 33 IQ studies, etc. I won't repeat it. What gives you the confidence to ignore that?
Well, I think the exact question should be returned to you. Because what gives you the self-importance that you are standing in? We'll just take one institution, the Centers for Disease Control. 15,000 people with an $8.9 billion budget. And all they do is research. When I've gone there, Jack's been there, I mean, there are PhDs from every country on earth. There's 220 countries on earth. I bet they have one doctor, one PhD, one physician from every single country. So my question to you is, why does the Centers for Disease Control endorse it today? Why does every reputable company endorse it today?
Well, first of all, there are 18,000...
That's all for our question for this time, but you do have a 7-minute speech.
Okay, then I'll continue.
Yes.
There are indeed 18,000 employees at the CDC with many specialities and skills. However, there's only one division at the CDC which is involved in water fluoridation, and that's the Oral Health Division, which is only 30 employees, and they're nearly all dentally trained, and their mission is to promote fluoridation to the point that they will travel to legislators around the country supporting statewide mandatory fluoridation. They have clearly a conflict of interest. They have never, to my knowledge, reviewed the IQ studies. They don't go to other parts of the CDC to resolve these questions. They come out with these statements, fluoridation is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century, based upon absolutely shoddy review of the literature, 6 years out of date on the health literature, and you saw the pathetic evidence of benefit there. So you're dealing with a biased agency, and I'm not saying that all 18,000 are like that. I'm sure those 18,000 people are embarrassed by the activities of the Oral Health Division, as if all we consisted of were teeth. I think their vision, the Oral Health Division, sees us as one big mouth with little legs on it, as if we had no brains and no kidneys and no bones and no endocrine system, because they're not interested in that. And you talk about 6,000 studies, I guarantee about 5,000 of those studies are on teeth, and teeth. There have been no studies in the United States investigating the relationship with fluoridation and lowering of IQ. There's been no studies in the United States investigating the possibility that fluoridation increases osteoarthritis rates. We have 27 million people in this country with osteoarthritis, and the first symptoms of fluoride poisoning of the bones is identical to osteoarthritis. But we're not looking. We're not looking to see if fluoride accumulates in the human pineal gland, which is what they discovered in... Jennifer Luke discovered that in England. No attempt to repeat that. No attempt to repeat her animal studies which showed lower melatonin production with respect to fluoride exposure. No attempt to look to see if there's a relationship with fluoridation and Alzheimer's disease, even though one animal study treating rats, an American study, treated rats at 1 part per million of fluoride in their drinking water for 1 year and found kidney damage, brain damage, visible under the microscope, a greater uptake of aluminum into the brain, and beta amyloid deposits, which is seen as a characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. No attempt. That study was published in 1998. 14 years later, we have seen no follow-up by that from the NIH. So it's amazing. On the one hand, they attack the methodology of any study that comes out of China or India or Iran and Mexico. I think there's a certain amount of racism involved here. And yet, with their superior understanding of epidemiology, they don't make any effort to do their own studies. If they're so good at epidemiology, why aren't they repeating these studies from China? Why aren't they treating these as any toxicologist would, as a red flag? It's a red flag. It's not proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, but it's a red flag. And look at what's at stake here. Look at what's at stake. If they're right, We are irreversibly damaging the brains of millions of children in this country. And once we've determined that that's happened, as we did with lead in gasoline, and I was involved in that issue in the 1970s, by the time we finally work against the lead industry and the gasoline industry and get lead out of gasoline, yes, we now know it lowered the IQ, the average IQ of American children in that period when we were using lead in gasoline by 5 IQ points. And yes, we did reduce the number of geniuses and double the number of mentally handicapped children in our society. You would think, would you not, that we would have learned some kind of lesson from that. Now, one of the people that knows a lot about this subject is Philip Grangi. And when you start talking about the junk science, don't forget, this study was done by a research team from Harvard University. It was a meta-analysis. It was very well done. It was published in a leading American journal, the American Environmental Health Perspectives. And that journal is published by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. So you can't get away with just dismissing all this stuff as junk science. You've got to face up to the fact that we have red flags being waved on, not only on the brain, but other tissues as well. And what I find is inexcusable. You know, if we were the edge of the cliff and we were taking this risk to cure cancer, that would be one thing. But we're talking about reducing tooth decay by a minimal amount from swallowing, knowing full well that dozens of European countries, 97% of the population in Europe is not drinking fluoridated water, but they are brushing their teeth with fluoridated toothpaste. Why can't we do what the Europeans are doing without poisoning our people, without taking these risks?
We were unable to find evidence for or make case for elimination a fluoridation program that has here benefited the public for more than half a century. Jay Lair, PhD, Arizona State University, water toxicologist. Dr. Jay Lair is groundwater hydrology from the University of Arizona, a degree in geological engineering. He taught both at U of A and Ohio State, served 25 years as the head of the Association of Groundwater Scientists. During that period, he did all kinds of research. He says, this is what he says about the fluoride debates. The greatest obstacle to progress lives in the entrenched positions, adversarial mentality, and unwillingness of the valid concerns of those on the other side of the fluoride chasm. Okay, the question, okay, then I'll ask it, look at this. The anti-fluoride movement must accept the indisputable evidence that precipitous decline in the incidence of childhood tooth decay is due to the increased fluoride uptake level. So then he goes on, who wrote it, but he mentions Dr. Connett in this book several times, and I have the book up here, but I just want to say this. In his book, he says if the anti-fluoridationist and the public health community would sit down at a table and go over how the methodology was done and look at the data and do it in a rational all-day scientific setting, not in a public hearing where this audience, not very many people know what a chi-square is and a p-value and haven't read literature of 25 years. But when I go to your video, my question is this. Here's your Dr. Paul Connett. And the opening scene, I don't know if you can see that, it's the White House draped with 3 Nazi flags and Nazi soldiers marching. And
That's not my video.
well, it's YouTube with your name on Dr. Paul Connett. And so I just want, my question is would you stand up and tell people that there is no conspiracy with mining companies and municipal water supplies. It's not a communist plot. People at the Centers for Disease Control don't make a living and laugh when children have rheumatism and thyroid disorders and cancer. I mean, the anti-fluoridationists, how does Nazism enter into the debate?
Well, first of all, if you read our book, we do disown those extreme...
I have your book.
If you read my book, you will
book.
find that, go to chapter 26, you will see that we disown these extreme conspiracy theories. We do our best to stop people yakking on about Nazis using it. We checked it out with the Eli Wiesenthal Foundation and found there was no substance to it in history. But since you raised the issue of Leah's book, which incidentally, even though it was published after the National Research Council report, gave it only one sentence, but this is what they did say. There is one anti-fluoridation charge that does have some truth to it. Anti-fluoride forces have always claimed that the many government-sponsored review panels set up over the years to assess the costs and benefits of fluoridation were stacked in favor of fluoridation. A review of the membership of the various panels confirms this charge. The expert committees that put together reports by the American Association for the Advancement of Science in 1941, 1944, and 1954, the National Academy of Sciences in 1951, 1971, 1977, and 1993, the World Health Organization in 1958 and 1970, and the U.S. Public Health Service in 1991 are rife with the names of well-known medical and dental researchers who actively campaigned on behalf of fluoridation or whose research was held in high regard in the pro-fluoridation movement. Membership was interlocking and incestuous.
Thank you, Dr. Connett. Dr. Farran, you have a 4-minute speech.
Is this my close?
No, there will be a question and answer period after this one. You have 2 more speeches total.
I have 2 more speeches,
Yep.
4 minutes, and how long I want to?
4 minutes on each.
Okay, I'm going to talk really, really fast. Okay, I think, my father told me, love many, trust few, paddle your own canoe. He said, love many. I love you guys. He said, trust few. He didn't say, trust no one. The overwhelming evidence by every institution in America and Canada and everywhere is for water fluoridation. We added the scientific method, added 35 years to your life. Do you realize in 1900, average life expectancy was 41 and 1 in 10 women died during childbirth? And we've gotten 35 more years from following the scientific method. And all we can find, I'll admit, all we can find at fluoride at 1 part per million is some fluorosis. This is mild. It would be moderate. I'm telling you the bad news. I'm honest with you about this. This is moderate to severe. This is the worst case I've seen. But notice there's no crowns, root canals, fillings. I mean, they got perfect teeth. Now, what can we do with that? Now, look at that. There's bleaching right there. That takes an hour. There's another bleaching case. Now, that's a woman, and women tend to bleach several times. But this can all be bleached out. They're happy campers. But here's why I am passionate about it. I have done this for 25 years. Do you know what it's like to stick a needle in a 2.5-year-old baby who's been up all night crying? And that's all rotted out teeth. Look at these big holes in cavities. These are baby teeth. This little girl's only 4 or 5. And talk about fluorosis. How would you like to walk around with Jaws teeth? You look like she's in a James Bond movie. Look at this little girl. She doesn't have any teeth. All these teeth are rotting. And look what this does to her nutrition. She doesn't eat fruits and vegetables and bite into apples. She doesn't have any teeth. She can't even drink cold. She's been up all night crying. Look at this stuff. This is a disaster. And the reason I'm for water fluoridation, and you might ask me, a great question for me is, why does a registered libertarian support water fluoridation? I mean, I know libertarians are anti-government, so they're probably against roads, bridges, fire departments, policemen, the military. I know libertarians want no government because they really trust Bain Capital and all these places to just do the right thing. But the bottom line is this. What I've noticed is that I come to here at Phoenix College, they hand me bottled water. That's all I see with the middle class, the upper middle class, and the rich. Everybody's got bottled water. That's not what happens to the poor. In the poor, South Phoenix, the West Side, you know they only drink water. They don't have dental insurance. 8% of all emergency room visits are these people in pain. Water fluoridation has been smacking down decay for the poor. If you don't like, and why is a libertarian for that? You're recreating half the level of fluoride already found naturally in the ocean, bumping it up from 0.3 to 0.7, is because you're going to pay for that in taxes, because good Americans aren't going to walk around and see 2-year-old little girls crying on the corner. They'd all be sitting around, well, isn't there something we can do? Yeah, raise taxes and then give billions of dollars to people like me. I mean, I'm sitting here trying to hurt my income. I'm sitting here trying to hurt the income. I don't like that. It doesn't feel good to make money with that. Look at this little girl. You really think fluoride in the water is the least of her problems? She doesn't even have nutrition. This is why water fluoridation is considered one of the 10 greatest public health benefits of all time. Look at these. These are baby teeth. Here's the permanent tooth growing, and you said that the fluoride doesn't matter about it being developed, that you can brush on the outside. That is so wrong. These are arteries, veins, and nerves carrying fluoride into the tooth as it's being built. Toothpaste only puts a little fluoride superficially. These teeth need to be built with fluoride and calcium and phosphorus from the ground up. Look at these fillings. Look at this little girl. And talk about IQ test. She has no self-esteem. How would you like to go to school looking like that? Do you think she smiles on her birthday? Do you think she smiles at Christmas? This little girl doesn't even want to go to school. That's what's going to hurt an IQ. Is that my beeper?
That's your time, Dr. Farran. Dr. Connett, you have 3 minutes to ask questions.
Yeah. You used just then the classic ploy of pro-fluoridation people, which is to show pictures of baby bottle tooth decay. I think you know full well that fluoridation cannot defeat the ravages which cause baby bottle tooth decay. That's because when a baby sucks on sugared water or Coca-Cola milk for hours on end, it rots the teeth to the gums, and no amount of fluoride can change that. You mentioned that they just had a different delivery system in Europe. 97% of the population in Europe does not drink fluoridated water. You said they fluoridated their salt. How many countries in Europe, and which ones, fluoridate their salt? You don't know. Well, but you just made a statement.
You can buy it at any store. I've lectured
Okay.
dentists in 40 countries.
Which countries? Which countries in Europe?
Well, just last month, I was talking to dentists. I went to Denmark. I went to Tallinn, Estonia. I went to St. Petersburg, Russia. I went to Berlin, Germany. I went to Helsinki, Finland. The month before that, I was in China. You can buy fluoridated salt everywhere I went, just like in Ireland, where they have the most...
The official statistics, maybe we can check this out. This is a good idea to really get this sorted out. But as my understanding is, there's only 4 countries in Europe that fluoridate their salt. Germany, France, Austria, and one other.
Those stores have 60,000 items. You can buy a Snickers bar in Shenzhen. Yeah. You can buy Ritz crackers. So if they sell the product, I mean, you walk into a store with 60,000 items, the consumer has access to those.
And you would agree that does give the consumer freedom of choice, because in all those stores, they could buy non-fluoridated salt as well as fluoridated.
And we could really raise our taxes to pay for Medicaid to cover dentistry, and Medicaid doesn't cover dentistry. So if you don't want to put it in the water and you don't want to buy bottled water, then raise taxes a lot, quit bad-mouthing Obamacare, and start paying for all these poor kids to come in and get dental treatment.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you stressed poor children. It's a very emotive argument. Very emotive. I think it's the most powerful argument for fluoridation. We're doing this for poor kids. But before you take that at face value, 80% of dentists in the United States do not treat children on Medicaid. And before you believe that you're doing a favor to poor kids, remember this. It's precisely poor families who cannot afford to avoid fluoride if they want to. They cannot afford all this bottled water or reverse osmosis. And next, we know from studies in India and China that the most vulnerable to fluoride's toxicity are those with poor nutrition. Low calcium, low magnesium, low vitamins, low protein. Where are you most likely to find poor nutrition in the United States? Answer, in low-income families. So this well-intentioned policy of targeting poor families, it is well-intentioned, is having, I think, a pernicious effect, because you trap this community, they can't avoid what you're doing, and secondly, it's worse for their children than for other children with better diets.
That's the end of our question and answer period. You do have a 4-minute speech, however, Dr. Connett.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I did love this notion of us sitting down and breaking bread together. I like that. I'm that kind of person. And that's why I applaud Dr. Farran for being here. I think you've started that process, and we should continue it. When we wrote this book, it was our real desire to raise the level of this debate. As I already said, we reject all these conspiracy theories. We wanted to focus on the science. And we documented every scientific argument with references to the literature. It's understated, not overstated. And that's partly because of the choice of my co-authors, who tame me down a bit. But it hasn't raised the level of debate. I think that most of the people that buy this book are already on our side. Where are the dental students? You've got a lot of dental students here. Any of you read this book? Have any of your professors suggested that you might get the other side of this story and read this book? Or do you just get one side of this? Now, I said, I hope we would raise the level of debate, but after 22 months, there's been absolutely no attempt by the pro-fluoridation folks to respond scientifically to this. I mean, look, we've done everything that you could ask from 3 scientists. We're fortunate, we're retired, we're all retired professors. We have plenty of time. We reviewed the literature. We didn't overstate, we understated. We put in the caveats where caveats were drawn. And you may be surprised when you read it to see how unemphatic we are on certain things. We're emphatic on the fact that red flags are being waved and we're not behaving responsibly. But there's been no attempt to respond in kind. And so the debate is still floundering in the mud. We're still having editorial writers dismissing fluoridationists as crackpots. I resent that. I'm not a crackpot. I'm a scientist. And I pride myself on pursuing science with integrity. And one of the things which has disappointed me more than anything else, that so many professional bodies in this country are pursuing this issue without integrity. They're acting like robots. Now, I don't hold this against the dentists and doctors. I think they're fine people. But the fact is, and you know this, dentists and doctors are very, very, very busy treating patients every day. They don't have time to do what I do, which is to read the primary literature. The primary literature. And so they have to take what is given to them by the ADA and the CDC and these other bodies at face value. And that's where the problem comes. They're getting slanted, biased reviews. And that's very sad. You know, if we lose integrity in science, then you can kiss public health goodbye. We have to have integrity in science, and particularly the science which is supposed to be at the service of public health. We need to be able to trust our doctors, to be able to trust our dentists, to be able to trust professional bodies, to be able to trust these regulatory agencies. But story after story is sickening. The influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the NIH, on the FDA, and so on the mercury amalgams issue. If you want a pre-runner of the bad science and the bad ethics of fluoride, look at what the ADA has done to defend mercury amalgams for about 170 years.
Thank you, Dr. Connett. We now have one last question and answer period for Dr. Farran to ask questions of Dr. Connett, and then we'll have our 2 summations.
So I have 3 minutes to ask questions,
And then your summation.
and then a 4-minute close. I would just like to say, well, first of all, how you describe the experience of being a dentist and a physician. There are some websites for dentists and physicians, and there's one particularly for dentists that has 150,000 members. And these water fluoridation debates have gone on this one website since 1999. It's gone on forever. And I want to assure you that it is the young students who get on there. Jack Gillenberg is the dean of the dental school. Jack, could you even get all the dental students to agree that today is Wednesday? I mean, they argue about everything. And children, I mean, my 17-year-old is in this 4th row. I mean, it's dad's wrong and an idiot until proven otherwise. And these dental students, I mean, my God, they chew up, they tear up. I have not seen anybody passively sit around doing fillings saying, well, whatever the ADA says. In fact, I would say most people argue with anything the ADA says. So the ADA is guilty till proven innocent. So I want to assure you that like lawyers in front of the Supreme Court, lawyers and physicians, MDs and dentists, they argue everything.
That's good. Is that a question? Well, that's very good to hear. It's very good to hear. I think the ADA is actually more of a trade association than a professional body. In fact, when they were taken to task in California for testimony on behalf of Mercury amalgams, they actually came back and said, we only give advice, we cannot be held responsible for any damage that comes from this advice. And so they said, we are a trade association, we're not a medical body. The unhealthy aspect of this is the ADA and the CDC are like Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They organize conferences together, they work together. This is the oral health division. So basically you've got a lot of dentists working for the ADA, as you'd expect, but the oral health division is also full of dentists, and they discuss strategy together, they work together on all kinds of things, and I've seen them. I saw them in Chicago celebrating fluoridation a number of years back. So I don't think we're getting much professional advice or material from the ADA. What we're getting from the ADA and what we're getting from other agencies that promote fluoridation is a clear case of working backwards. If a study finds harm, it is a junk study. It's junk science. There's something wrong with the methodology. If a scientist speaks up against fluoridation, there's something wrong with that scientist. There is not the ability to actually do what you want to do, which is to take these issues. Let's take the IQ issue. Not one single review, and I refer now to the last few years, the National Medical Research Council in Australia, the Irish Fluoridation Forum, Health Canada, or any other of the recent reviews have done anything but a pitiful review of the IQ studies. And the worst was Health Canada.
That's all our time for the question and answers. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Connett. We'll now have our 2 summations, each 4 minutes, beginning with Dr. Farran.
Okay, so this is my close. So, do I get my? Don't start my clock yet.
Nope.
Okay. I'm going to use this 4-minute close to just. Here's my close. Now, I just want to review that. First of all, there's only 2 animals that get cavities, and that's humans and Winnie the Pooh because he eats honey. Okay. Bambi and Thumper don't brush or floss. They never had a cavity. Shamu doesn't brush or floss. They never had a cavity. We're supposed to be eating this all the time. Now, you're looking at me wondering, is this guy pregnant or does he not listen to his own advice, okay? This is what we're supposed to eat. And we'd all probably live a lot longer if we'd ate this. But here's the reality in America. In fact, when I see a cavity today, when I read an x-ray, this is what my unconscious sees, okay? It's like, it's just sugar. We eat 150 pounds of sugar a year per person. China only eats 10. We eat 150 pounds. Only one country eats more sugar than us, and it's France, and I've lectured there too. I mean, those guys put cream and chocolate on everything. Even their morning roll is filled with cream and chocolate. But when you drink water fluoridation, you are continually bathing your teeth. It's just like someone's going down on asphalt and they're patching potholes and potholes and potholes. And this liquid is bathing your teeth because you're not eating just this. You're eating that. You're an American. That's what your x-rays look like. Cavities on every surface. And by the way, there's these, I want to remind you, these are flossing cavities. In my office, we still see at least 80% of all cavities are in between the teeth where the floss goes. And everybody always asks me, well, what toothbrush do you recommend? What toothpaste do you recommend? And I want to say, you know, I wish you'd throw your toothbrush and toothpaste and Listerine away and just floss every morning and every night. That's what we see. Massive disease. So water fluoridation is going to prevent these root canals. By the way, these are $2,000. Zachary will go to college free, okay? I graduated $87,000 student loans. He won't because you guys eat sugar and don't floss. So, you know, like, take the fluoride out of the water, I'll just get rich. We used to do this a long time ago. Everyone forgets that if you're 65 years old in the United States, 3 in 10 have no teeth. We're not talking about baby bottle tooth decay. Those were posterior teeth. I showed full arches missing. I mean, we see that's $5,000 to have a denture snap-on like that. That's $10,000 to have 4 implants and a lower denture like that snap-on. That's $20,000 to have 6 implants. And grandma's paying $20,000 for 6 implants and a lower bridge because she can't eat. And that kills her nutrition. That's why when you go into a nursing home, there's no fruits and vegetables. There's no apples and carrots. It's a carb fest, just macaroni and cheese and cottage cheese and pumpkin pie because there's no teeth. 3 in 10 Americans have no teeth at 65. Another 3 in 10 have less than half their teeth. We see celebrities getting behind milk. We're not taking vitamin D out of milk, just like we're not taking fluoride out of the water. We're not going to go back to rickets. Iodized salt. I've seen this myself with my own eye. He mentioned Ireland. I lectured there. Just did 6 countries in Europe. China a month ago. There's iodine, and you're not going to eat a rock. But you need it, or you get this. Here's vitamin C to prevent scurvy. Community water fluoridation is safe. It's effective. We sit there, David Sucher, the Surgeon General, just came out with this again. But look at the cost savings. For most cities, every dollar invested in water fluoridation saves $38 in dental treatment. You guys are $16 trillion in debt. And the Republicans still don't want to raise taxes. Now, if a dollar invested in water fluoridation prevents giving me $38, and again, we're talking about the poor. We're talking about the lower socioeconomic. You don't want fluoride in the water? You could drive down here, sit in Phoenix College after work, then go buy a bottle of water. But who's going to pay for the little 2-year-old girl who's in the emergency rooms when 8 out of 100 visits in just Arizona are from that? It benefits everyone. So again, I want to end with this. Community water fluoridation, 10 reasons. Single most effective public health measure to prevent tooth decay. Simply adjust natural level of fluoride that's already in every water supply ever found on the planet to half the level that already found in the ocean, which covers 70% of the planet. Similar to fortifying other foods and beverages, I mean, look at your cereal box. I mean, when you're sitting there eating Cocoa Puffs and Fruit Loops and all that stuff, I mean, you might as well be eating the cardboard, but look at all the vitamins that are legally mandated to be fortified.
That's your time, Dr. Farran, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds to finish your list here.
Oh, thank you. See the bald guys stick together. Helps protect all ages against both tooth decay, safe and effective, lifetime cost per person less than a single dental filling, 51 million school hours were lost each year from dental-related diseases, recognized by more than 100 organizations, which I'm begging you to trust. 74% of Americans are already drinking it today, and it's endorsed by the ADA. Thank you very, very much for listening to me.
And Dr. Connett's closing.
Thank you. Well, let me just comment on a few things you just said. That study about for every dollar you save $38, real bit of junk science there. They didn't include the cost of dental fluorosis. Remember, we have 41% of kids 12 to 15 have dental fluorosis. They didn't count the cost of any other health effect because they ignore all that. But they did funny things like assuming that the loss of work at $15 an hour loss of work with tooth decay. But that doesn't apply to children. So there are huge weaknesses in that. You once again brought up the fact of vitamin C and iodine, etc., etc., etc. These are all well-established nutrients with large margins of safety. Fluoride is not a nutrient, and I challenge you to produce any study which says it is, with a very small margin of safety between the levels we use and the harmful levels. I did appreciate your comment about flossing. The favorite notice I saw in my dental chair was, you don't have to floss all your teeth, only the ones you want to keep. And I thought that was great. And I was in Italy a few months later, and I'm flossing my teeth, and ping! My crown shot across the room as the flossing moved up. Anyway, I have a second thoughts about that. Now, I'd like to finish up by talking about the great fluoridation gamble. We have 2 chapters of that in my book, 9 to 10. This is the gamble taken by the US Public Health Service in 1950 when they endorsed fluoridation. None of the trials had been completed. They had practically no health studies on the table. The gamble. Fluoride could damage the growing tooth without damaging any other growing tissue, such as the bone, brain, or the endocrine system. No matter how much water kids drank, no matter how much fluoride kids got from other sources, no matter their nutritional status, no matter their health status, most fluoridated countries have done no scientific studies to check this out, only endless studies on teeth. And most of the studies indicating harm have come from non-fluoridated countries which don't have the axe to grind of keeping the fluoridation program going. That's why they're important. But the US and other fluoridating countries make no attempt to repeat these studies. This is what Arvid Carlsson said. He's a Nobel Prize winner. He led the successful campaign against fluoridation in Sweden. You know, with all these professional bodies saying how wonderful it is, isn't it interesting that Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Germany, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Portugal, and Greece, amongst others, have not fluoridated? Don't they have professional bodies over there? Don't they read all this astounding literature over here in the United States? Well, anyway, Arvid Carlsson did read the literature. One of the things he said was, one wonders what an increase in the exposure to fluoride, such as occurs in infants bottle-fed with fluoridated water diluted preparations, may mean for the development of the brain and the other organs. Now, that was in 1978. Very prophetic, wasn't it? Because the first IQ study came in 1991, the first big animal study in 1995, and since then we've had hundreds of animal studies and these 33 IQ studies and other human studies. So, my final message is to the young people here. Forget the old ones, but the young people, the dental students, your whole career is ahead of you. And what you need more than anything else are 2 things, really. Integrity and an open mind. And I hope you exercise both. And the way you start that is to, and I'm not trying to sell the book, I don't make any money out of this, it all goes to the Fluoride Action Network. But to start by reading this book. Now, if you don't have time to read the book, then you can do something in 28 minutes, which might shake you. You can watch a videotape online at our webpage, fluoridealert.org. It's called Professional Perspectives on Water Fluoridation. It features Arvid Carlsson, Nobel Prize winner. It features 3 members of the National Research Council. It features 2 former employees at the EPA, one a specialist on risk assessment, several dentists who previously were pro-fluoridation, and a few other scientists. 15 scientists in all, talking for 28 minutes. I challenge you to watch that professional video, and when you've done so, if you are convinced by it, then have the courage to change your mind and tell your professors. It's about time that you at dental school should hear both sides of this story and not just one side. Thank you very much.
Would you guys please join me in giving these gentlemen another round of applause, please? Thank you. Very, very compelling information. Very compelling information from both sides. I don't know about you folks, but I'm going to start drinking 2 glasses of water, one with fluoride and one without, just to cover my bases. Here's the fun part, folks. These people didn't come just to speak at you or to you, but to speak with you. We're going to now transition into the question and answer segment of this evening. And we're going to lay a few ground rules, and we ask that you guys would be respectful of one another. We ask that there would be no Nazi references. This is America, so there's some censorship. And we ask that there be no conspiracy conversations unless it's the conspiracy about Pee Wee football and the refs being paid. So we're going to have Jody, Colleen, walk among you guys and let you guys field some questions.
Thank you. I'm looking at what I printed off shortly after 5 p.m. tonight from PubMed, age-specific fluoride exposure in drinking water and osteosarcoma. This is a Harvard study that indicated that little boys get cancer of the bone from drinking fluoridated water. This is from today, 5:06 p.m. So my question is, how many boys in Phoenix, Arizona have developed angiosarcoma because of fluoridated water for both?
We'll start with Dr. Farran's answer.
Thank you for asking that question. I've been on the phone for all month. You can't find an orthopedic surgeon that can even find a single case. When you look at those studies, my first question to you is exactly what was the level found? What was the fluoride level? Trust me, when fluoride, I know, but what was the part per million?
We explored age-specific and gender-specific effects of fluoride level in drinking water and the incidence of sarcoma. We used data from a matched case control study conducted through 11 hospitals in the United States that included a complete residential history for each patient and type of drinking water, public, private, bottled, used at each address. Our analysis was limited to cases less than 20 years old. We standardized fluoride exposure estimates based on CDC recommended target levels that take climate into account.
Yeah, the actual fact is the study investigated exposure to fluoridated water at 1 part per million, or the equivalent. And what Elise Bassin found at Harvard, she was a dental student getting a doctorate at Harvard, what she found is that young boys exposed in their 6th, 7th, and 8th years to fluoridated water had a 5 to 7-fold increased risk of succumbing to osteosarcoma. Very serious, because it's frequently a fatal to cancer. Now, her advisor at Harvard, who is a known promoter of fluoridation and also a consultant for Colgate, hid her study from the public and his peers and his funders for 3 years. And it wasn't until my son found her thesis in the rare books section of the Harvard Library that it came to light. And it was quite a scandal at the time. It was covered in the Washington Post and so on. When her study was finally published with other authors from Harvard in 2006, in the same journal, Chester Douglas, her professor, sends in a letter and says, "My largest study count these findings." Well, he promised that study for the summer of 2006. And we waited. It didn't come out in 2006, nor 2007, 8, 9, 10. Finally, the study came out in 2011. And in no way did it refute Bassin's findings, nor could it, because the methodology was to measure fluoride in the bone at biopsy and autopsy. And there's no way, it's not like rings on a tree, there's no way that the fluoride levels are cumulative, so there's no way of backtracking and finding the fluoride levels in that critical years of exposure, the 6th, 7th, and 8th years. So we have an unrefuted study from Harvard which indicates that fluoridation may actually be killing a few young men each year. Not many, It's not that common a cancer. Not many, but how many lives would you allow to go in this quest to save a little amount of tooth decay, which you can save with other ways?
Thank you, Dr. Connett. Dr. Farran, a chance to respond?
Yes, I would just like to say that when you're reading dental research, there's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of variables going on. If it was something as simple as one thing, with 320 million people, it would just line up between the 25% that's not fluoridated, and this is why water fluoridation has been going up from 50%, 60%, 75%. There's just thousands, if not millions, of variables going on. I've been reading these studies for 25 years, and it's just too simplistic thinking to think, well, this group had higher osteosarcoma and this group didn't, and there was one variable and they measured fluoride. That's just an oversimplification. And the other thing I noticed in the way he says in the fluoridation deal, it's always like it's a researcher found this and they had to hide it from everyone, and 3 years later, and then it was found at the back of the library. That's not what I see when I go to the Centers for Disease Control. People are just their number one supporter. People are working 12-hour days trying to cure breast cancer and osteosarcoma and everything. No one's doing a little research paper and it's hidden from everybody and the sponsors won't let them come out with it. I mean, that's that conspiracy mentality thinking. I mean, everybody is their biggest cheerleader at the CDC. These people dedicate their lives to trying to save you from disease, while you're going to go home tonight and eat Doritos and drink a Dr. Pepper.
Thank you, Dr. Farran. Another question?
Okay, over here.
Yes, my question was, you keep mentioning a lot of sponsors and these people that endorse water fluoridation, and you named off a lot of these companies, ADA and the CDC and all these kind of people. And you just mentioned again that they are looking out for the better of America and this and that. You know, all these studies are paid for by government funding, and my question is, aren't they paid in order to find in favor of water fluoridation because it's making them money?
Absolutely not. And you know, a business only manages three things: people, time, and money. And if the CDC had these top-down command and control policies, they couldn't attract scientists from around the world to go there. I mean, they have to have a very creative environment, like Apple, like all your modern companies. It's a very, very, very creative atmosphere. And again, and I understand. I'm an American. I understand the anti-government tendency. I've lectured to dentists in 40 countries. America is the most anti-government attitudes of all the people. But I always hear about how bad the government is, and I say, wasn't it a government operation that landed on the moon? Wasn't that all a bunch of PhD scientists like the CDC? When Adolf Hitler went crazy, didn't we go from a paper from Albert Einstein to an exploded bomb in 22 months? Wasn't that a government operation? Wasn't D-Day a government operation? When Eisenhower came back from World War II, we built the interstate system. That's why every 5th mile has no lights on the side of the highway so that B-52s could land there. I mean, don't you love the freeways? Why is government always the bad guy? I mean, when your house on fire, is the fireman a big government guy that's bad? When your house gets broken into and you call the cops, is that a big government bad guy? When your grandmother retires on Social Security, is she taking it from the big government bad guy? When grandma goes and gets her hip transplant for $150,000 paid for by Medicare without a copayment, is that the big government? I understand the distrust for government. I mean, gosh, we were the first democracy on earth. 1776, George Washington went against the greatest empire, England, and I get it, but I'm telling you that organizations are people. And there's just as many good people in government as there are in free enterprise. There's bad people in free enterprise, there's bad people in the government, there's good people in government, and there's bad people in government. People are people, they just manage people, time, or money. Business only has three functions: you make something, sell something, watch the numbers. And I'm telling you, you have to trust at least the Centers for Disease Control. And when you go in there, and he just said that they're not doing research.
Thank you, Dr. Farran.
Can I just finish one point? Just one point.
One quick point.
When you go in the CDC, they're doing research. There's people that look like they're standing on the moon. They're in all these bacterial viral suits. There's a massive amount of research going on at the CDC.
Would you like a chance to respond, Dr. Connett?
Yes, I would. I agree with you. In any organization, you can have good players, bad players, honest, dishonest, and so on. No question about that. I don't have the same respect for the oral health division of the CDC. I think they're totally biased. But I think the thing which is shocking here, you're right, American science is fantastic. But American science, as applied to the dangers posed by fluoridation, is the most shoddy exercise in science, in public health, that I've ever seen. They haven't mobilized these scientists to do the most basic things. Why haven't they? They know that about 50% of the fluoride that you take in each day accumulates in your bones. Why haven't they monitored the fluoride levels in people's bones throughout the United States as a function of how long they've lived in a fluoridated community? We've got practically no data, nor urine levels, nor blood levels. And there's another thing. We know, and we've known since 1942, Dean's famous work, that the severity of dental fluorosis is a measure of how much fluoride the kid was exposed to before the permanent teeth erupted. So you've got a wonderful tool for any epidemiologist that wants to look at potential health effects in children, because you've got millions of kids in America with no dental fluorosis, very mild dental fluorosis, mild dental fluorosis, moderate dental fluorosis, and even severe dental fluorosis. Now you've got the x-axis. You could be looking at lowered IQ, you could be looking at bone fractures, you could be looking at earlier onset of puberty. Anything that you wanted to study in kids with the red flags that have been found in other countries, there it is waiting for you to do it. And yet, for some reason, American epidemiologists have not been mobilized to do that. Now, I don't want to get into a conspiracy theorist, and you're going to say this, immediately I tell you the story. The groundbreaking work on fluoride and animal behavior was done by Dr. Phyllis Mullinex at the Forsyth Dental Center. They brought Phyllis in from the Harvard Hospital to use her methodology to study animal behavior. It was an elegant system. And her brief was to look at the toxicity, the neurotoxicity of all the substances used in dentistry. And she was made the chairman of the first toxicology department in any dental school in America, which is wonderful. Well, she proceeded to study, and one of the first substances that she looked at was fluoride, using her methodology, and sure enough, she found that the animals exposed to fluoride before birth developed hyperactivity, and the animals after birth were exposed to hypoactivity, couch potato. It produced all kinds of shock waves in Washington. They said, do you realize what you're saying? You're saying that fluoride may be lowering the IQ of American children. She says, yes, it may be. Anyway, her chairman wanted her to give him a copy of the paper before she published it. And she said, no, the publication of my paper is between me and the journal. And that's the way she went. She got the journal peer-reviewed, and you can imagine this one got real peer-reviewed, and it was accepted for publication. On the day it was accepted for publication, Phyllis Mullinex was fired from Forsyth Dental Center, and she was told that her work was no longer relevant to dentistry, and she's not had a job in academia since. Now, that's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory, but it's very upsetting, and it sends an awful message to other researchers that might have looked to fluoride. Don't get involved with this issue. It's like touching a live wire. It's going to be the end of your career. And I'm hoping that the Harvard meta-analysis, being so respectable, will break open now the doors, and other researchers will start to look into this subject in the United States.
It looks like Colleen has another question for us.
Question over here.
Good evening. I'm just flabbergasted. I have a study here. My name is Nathaniel Davis. I have a study from 1927, a manual of pharmacology and its application to therapeutics and toxicology. This is Sanders Company medical information. But it talks about sodium fluoride from 1927. This is before Adolf Hitler or any conspiracies. But they say that sodium fluoride is a general protoplasmic poison. It has strong local irritant action. The systemic action resembles that of oxalates and is probably produced in the same manner. What my question is, Dr. Fred, as far as the sodium fluoride now in the water, 67 years, the pineal gland, I'm very concerned about it because everybody has that, and the pineal gland is being calcified more in the United States than anywhere on the planet. And we have more fluoride problems than any place. I would like for you to address that because 80% or higher of Americans are calcified pineals, and it leads to Alzheimer's, and you know that. And one more thing, I'm an African-American male, and it says that we have the highest prostate cancer on the planet, okay? And that has a lot to do with the melatonin receptors that are in the prostate that's emitted from the pineal gland. If the pineal gland is not producing melatonin, it's not going to function. Now answer that, Dr.
Well, one thing I think we can all agree on, it is a tragedy that a country that spends $1.4 trillion in a year can only muster up $9 billion to the CDC to research. I've never thought that would make any sense. I always thought there should be at least a 2 or 3 penny tax on every dollar at every intersection of healthcare so that 2 or 3 cents of every dollar could at least just research. And I wish, why is there 940,000 MDs and only 15,000 people at the CDC? Isn't that number completely backwards? Can I go to the slide about one last thing? But to answer your question, I don't mean to be facetious, but I like to remind people, I can't leave, but basically, here's the deadly fact. Everything is toxic at a certain amount. So this is what I jokingly recall to as the deadly facts about water. Water can be chemically synthesized by burning rocket fuel. That's true. Fact, overconsumption of water can cause excessive sweating, urination, and even death. Fact, 100% of all serial killers, rapists, and drug dealers have admitted to drinking water. Fact, one of the primary ingredients in herbicides and pesticides is water. Fact, water is the leading cause of drowning. Fact, 100% of all people exposed to water will die. And it gets very, very tough when you're dealing with a human being. I'm 5'7", 200 pounds, and 1 trillion cells. And the variables that I'm going through from diet and water and nutrition, and I want to show one other slide real quick in answering your question.
Sodium fluoride and pineal gland. Answer that question. Yeah. That's what I want to know. I don't want to know about all of this. I want to know why you want to poison this country because it's an open concentration camp. That's right.
Are you talking about Dr. Luke's study? Is that what he's referring to, Dr. Luke? And when Dr. Luke, she doesn't even have a working phone number, email address. How long ago was Dr. Luke in a pineal gland? What was that, 20 years ago?
No.
And calcium.
Do you want the answer?
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Luke published her PhD thesis in 1997. I managed to get copies of her thesis to several regulatory agencies in the United States because I thought it was extremely important. She published part of her thesis in 2001 in Carrie's research, right under the nose of the dental community. And what she showed was that fluoride accumulated in the human pineal gland, in the calcifying crystals. And the concentrations that she found in those crystals were higher than levels reached in the bone of people with crippling skeletal fluorosis. Not in terms of quantity, obviously in terms
But you don't see any crippling skeletal fluorosis in the United States of America.
No,
there's not one person in this room
that's not the point.
that's seen a person with skeletal fluorosis.
What we see in the United States is 27 million cases of osteoarthritis and no attempt to see if any of those cases may have been caused by fluoride, even though identical symptoms are caused by...
Actually, I'm very glad you said that because I love reading research about arthritis. And what's linking most to all arthritis is a raise in the C-reactive protein, which means mild inflammation. And fluoride has never been linked to raising the C factor, but everything about cancer and osteosarcosis and all this stuff is linked right to elevating. And like one of the biggest things that everybody's looking at is gluten in wheat. Gluten in wheat, you can see a cereal grain-based diet of wheat and soybean and rice and corn. I mean, that there's tons of data to say that if you eat the American bread, and the food group of America is telling you to eat 4 or 5 servings of bread and all this kind of stuff like that. There's tons of research that associates bread, gluten, raising C-reactive protein, but there's not one study ever done on Earth that shows that fluoridated water raises your C-reactive protein.
Well, maybe there's a different mechanism. I'm surprised that you don't take advantage of the fact that millions of people in India and China who live in so-called endemic fluorosis areas have been crippled by fluoride. And we know that the first symptoms of that skeletal fluorosis are identical to arthritis. I'm not saying that all cases of
And
arthritis...
can I make a point about China, since I just came back there and I've been to Asia all around? If you look at the top 10 causes of death in the world, okay, when you see number 1 ischemic heart death, 12.8% of all deaths last year from that. That's rich countries eating cheeseburgers. Next, stroke and cerebral vascular disease. We know that it's completely salt intake. That just doesn't happen if you eat less than 1 gram of sodium a day, and the richest 20 countries eat 4 grams a day. But number 3, lower respiratory infections. Because when you go to Asia, when you go to Africa, they're cooking with cardboard and trash in their house, and just like smoking. I mean, if you rubbed a cigarette on your arm, you wouldn't get high, but smoking goes straight in your lungs, and their heating and cooking fuel is an atrocity, and then their electricity comes from just open burning of coal, and so that's why you see lower respiratory, 6%. Next is chronic obstructive pulmonary, same thing what they're breathing. Diarrhea is because they don't have chlorine in the water. HIV is because they don't have treatment for that. Trachea, bronchus, lung cancer, again, it's the air that they're breathing. So, when you look at studies from China, I mean, you just cannot go to China and India and Africa where the smoke they're breathing, the smokestacks they're breathing, and link any increase in any blood serum level of any element from water fluoridosis. I mean, there's just, the comorbidity factor is too high. And once again, back to everyone in this room, you should get your C-reactive protein checked every single year. Now they got a C-reactive sensitive that you can get checked, and that is one of the biggest breakthroughs we're on to now. That actually predicts more bad stuff is coming down the pipeline right now on you than a mammogram and a chest x-ray, and water fluoridation is not linked to raising C-reactive protein.
Excuse me. Dr. Connett?
It's well established that in China, there are 3 causes of skeletal fluorosis. One is drinking brick tea, one is cooking with coal, etc., heating with coal, and the third one is the fluoride in the water supply. And it is silly to ignore all this data and continue blind and not investigate this as a possible factor. But you still haven't answered this man's question about the pineal gland. And I can tell you...
Thank you, Dr. Connett. That's a very good point. And we're going to move on to the next question.
Yeah, we want to make sure, listen, the debate part was for them, this part is for you. So make sure you ask your questions. The only dumb question is the one never asked. So please make sure that we get out here and make sure that we get around to everyone to ask their questions. Here you go, sir.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for being here. I'd like to ask exactly to this gentleman, what exactly are they putting in the water as is represented as fluoride? It's called, I believe, hydrofluorosilicic acid. It, from what my research has resulted in, I believe, a 30% concentration of fluoride and other concentrations of toxic chemicals. Could you address that, please?
Well, as far as hexafluoric acid, so you talked about that. This is the inorganic compound with the formula H2 sulfur. It is commonly used for water fluoridation. Like several related compounds, hexafluorosilicic acid does not exist. It doesn't even exist as a discrete species. That is a material with the formulation of that has not been isolated. It's just something on paper, because instantly when it goes into the water, the free fluorine is gone. It's like bleach. Salt is sodium with chloride. Bleach is sodium with chloride with an oxygen in the middle. When you put bleach in the water, that chlorine's gone. It's free chlorine. So where it comes from, like when you see fluoride in the ocean at 1.5 parts per million, it could have came from anything. It could have been bonded earlier to anything with a positive charge. So we've used sodium fluoride. This is the best free fluoride that we make now. The commodity chemical hydrogen fluoride is produced from fluorspar by treatment with sulfuric acid. As a byproduct, approximately 50 kilograms is produced per ton. It's also produced, well, this is too technical, I'm sorry. But I'll say this. The potassium salt of hexafluorosilicic acid is used in the production of porcelains. The magnesium salt is used in concrete and insecticides. And the barium form is for phosphors. And that's another thing I see in the anti-fluoridation literature, is they'll say, well, this is used in insecticides. True, the magnesium salt is, not the hexafluorosalt. The potassium salt, and they'll say, well, it's used to etch porcelain. That's not what we're talking about. The barium salters are fertilizers. So people will look at this, and they don't have a degree in organic chemistry, and they start mixing barium with magnesium, potassium, and come up with that it's used in insecticides and fertilizers and pesticides. And it's what I call an abuse of the scientific literature.
Well, yes,
Dr. Connett.
that is not organic chemistry, by the way. That's inorganic chemistry, and it's not sulfur, it's silicon. I am a professor of chemistry, and I do know a little bit about this. For about 100 years, the phosphate fertilizer industry released two incredibly toxic gases, hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride. And for about 100 years, these gases decimated the local vegetation, crippled the cattle in Florida, ruined the citrus groves in the area. And eventually, they were forced to put a spray of water on their plant. And that spray of water converted the hydrogen fluoride and the silicon tetrafluoride into this solution, hexafluorosilicic acid, 23% solution. Now, the interesting part is they can't dump that stuff into the sea by international law. They can't dump it locally because it's too concentrated. Now, there's a vagary in hazardous waste regulations in the United States, which actually is quite sensible. If a chemical industry produces a hazardous waste material, byproduct, and someone buys it from them, which is what you want another chemical industry to buy it from them, it's no longer treated as a hazardous waste, it's treated as a product. And so what is happening with this hexafluorosilicic acid is they can't dump it into the sea, they can't dump it locally, but because the water departments buy it from them, it becomes a product. Now, my major concern here is with the contaminants. I went through this before. There are many contaminants in there, including arsenic, including lead, both known to be human carcinogens. There's no safe level. You know you're increasing the cancer rate when you add these fluoridating, industrial-grade fluoridating chemicals into the water. And what makes it worse, and a little bit scary, is the same rock that's used to manufacture phosphoric acid, phosphate, in Florida is also mined for uranium. So you've also got some radioactive material in there as well.
I'm going to stop you there, Dr. Connett.
I mean, it is amazing. And furthermore, I've been on the phone all month with the local Phoenix Water Department. They have PhDs in hydrology, and they take this extremely serious. And they more look at this from a mechanical engineering point of view to make sure that it's exactly 0.7 parts per million. Our Phoenix water supply is a brain trust of PhDs. I mean, it's amazing.
Good response. We have another question?
Okay, we have another question over here.
Hey, I just want to say thank you guys for coming out, because I never really thought about my water before I drank it, but I'll be thinking about it a little bit more. Just a question for both of you, and it's really simple. Do both of you agree that putting fluoride on your teeth only so like once a day, putting fluoride on your teeth and rinsing it off is a beneficial thing for you? Straight up question for both of you.
Absolutely. Toothpaste is 1,000 part per million fluoride. It repairs all the patches, all the holes that the bacteria that are eating yours. It produces acid, demineralizes teeth, etc. When you come into the dental office, we do 5,000 part per million. But what's most effective is when that baby human is forming from gestation all the way to 21 years old. It's the water on the inside, in the bloodstream, building that tooth before it even pops through the gum. And when that tooth, when that entire building, brick by brick by brick, has availability for not just carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. It's more than just a protein. But when it has a bioavailability of fluoride, calcium, and phosphorus, it's one hell of a tooth.
That's a yes. Dr. Connett?
If you'd asked the question a different way, if you'd asked me, would I prefer to see water fluoridation or an attempt to get fluoridated toothpaste to low-income families, etc., I would have said every time it's more rational to target teeth topically with fluoridated toothpaste.
But you don't swallow toothpaste, so it wouldn't be in the bloodstream for a developing child's tooth from birth.
Yeah, so you have to be extremely careful. Personally, I would prefer to see the fluoride applied with a paintbrush very carefully to the surface of the tooth and avoid, as much as possible, going through the gums into the bloodstream. Now ask me a different question. Do I use fluoridated toothpaste? I haven't used fluoridated toothpaste for 16 years. Tooth decay is not caused by too little fluoride. It's caused by too much sugar and not enough education for dental hygiene.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Bambi and Thumper never got a cavity. How about this poor lady's had her hand up the whole time?
Here in the front.
Thank you, and thank you for an interesting evening. Doctor, I'd like to ask what kind of research you would like to have the research community do, since what you've presented is areas that have too much fluoride in the water naturally, 2.4 parts per million, not 0.0, 0.7. Do you want them to do studies that are going to cause these kinds of problems? In water fluoridation, it's not just putting fluoride in, it's taking out fluoride when it's higher than 0.7 parts per million. So I'm confused. It seems to me that you want some very dangerous studies to be done to create the problems that you've seen randomly in parts of the world that don't have water fluoridation and don't have careful monitoring of the level of fluoride.
What's dangerous is the medical and dental community proceeding without any studies at all. That's what's really dangerous, especially when you've got these red flags. My training, well, one aspect of I'm going to answer your question. One aspect of my training is toxicology. And what you normally do when you've got a toxic substance is to experiment with animals, and you experiment with high doses on the animals, and then you have to extrapolate from high-dose experiments in animals to low-dose, predict what would happen with low doses in humans. And it's very difficult. Now, in the case of fluoride, we're in the luxurious position of millions of people who, not wanting to, being exposed to high natural levels of fluoride in their drinking water. We should take advantage of the fact that China and India are studying these communities, and the reason they're studying these communities is, you're right, they want to take fluoride out of the water. When I went to China, I was the guest of the Center of Disease Control in China, which is trying to take fluoride out of the water. Our CDC is trying to put fluoride into the water.
That's just simply not true.
It is true. Now, of course, you're going to argue that 0.7 is so much lower than 1.9, which is the threshold of Zhang's study. But 1.9 is so different from 0.7. That's if you could tightly control the dose. If everybody drank a liter, you might be able to do that. But you've got some people drinking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 liters of water a day. I was in Western Australia with the miners there. We're drinking between 10 and 12 liters a day. When you put fluoride in the water, you can't control the dose. Therefore, 1.9 parts per million, and you're finding an effect, is very, very, very serious for the millions of children in the United States that are drinking water at 0.7, 1.2, 1.
Thank you, Dr.
Because some of them are drinking a
Connett.
lot of water, and they're getting fluoride from other sources.
Brief response.
I mean, that diatribe is wrong on so many levels. Let me just try to address a few. Number one, we don't put fluoride in the water. We adjust the level from 0.3 to 0.7. Here in Arizona, on the Navajo Indian Reservation, we adjust it down from 44 parts per million to 0.7. In Casa Grande, it comes out naturally at 4. So in many of the water supplies in Arizona, the hydrologist and water department is actually taking the fluoride out. And so no one put it in. And if there's anything wrong with a baby, then how come when baby Shamu is born in the ocean that covers 70% of the planet at 1.5, there's no problems with mammals growing up in the ocean? And as far as who put fluoride in the water, well, half the people think it was creationism and Jesus or Allah or Yahweh did it, and the other half think it's the Big Bang and fluoride came from a supernova explosion.
That is just the most, I'm sorry, with all respect, an outrageous piece of semantics. To say that you're not adding fluoride when you go from 0.3 to 0.7, you're only adjusting it, is absolutely simplistic semantics. It has no place in any kind of formal
What do you call it
debate.
when we take it on the Navajo Indian Reservation from 44 to 1? What do you call that? I mean, do we at least get kudos
I call
and a
that
prize?
removal of fluoride.
All right, well, just as many places in Arizona
Thanks, Doctor.
are removing it down as adding it in.
Thank you, Dr. Farran.
To our esteemed speakers, we've had the debate portion, and so to expedite this process, we have a lot of hands up. I'd like to stay focused with one question, one answer. These people are out here late, and I'd like to have them have their questions answered. So we're going to get through this crowd. Thank you.
Dr. Connett? Dr. Connett?
Yes.
I first just would like to personally tell you that I personally admire you, man to man. I just admire you. I do. And I'd like to ask, I'd like you to tell me what a mercury amalgam filling is. And
I'll go to mercury. That's a fun argument. I'll switch from fluoridation to mercury.
And I want to know, and another thing I'd like to know is whether the poor children get mercury lead-free fillings.
I think the only filling allowed under Medicaid, I think, is mercury amalgams. That may have changed. Mercury amalgams are literally an amalgam of mercury and other metals, including silver and maybe some copper, and then the identical friend will know more about it. But the really deceptive thing is when they call these silver fillings, when they are 50% mercury. And what we have an expert on this, Dr. David Kennedy, who's behind the camera back. And anybody wants to know about the dangers of mercury fillings, talk to David Kennedy. There's a whole organization, the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, which has devoted its existence in trying to eliminate mercury amalgams from the face of the earth. Three countries have banned it.
Can I respond to this? First of all, we have a ton of research on mercury. Number one, again, middle class and rich, they buy all tooth-colored fillings. It only goes for the poor. But through America's 1.5 million abortions a year, we know that fluoride in a silver filling, it's half mercury, but it's an inorganic salt. It's bonded to silver, zinc, copper, and tin. If you swallow a silver filling, 24 hours later, you poop the whole thing out. Where you're getting mercury in your bloodstream is because from burning coal for 50 years, from 1950, the ocean was 1 part per million mercury. Now it's 4 part per million mercury. They're this close to issuing warnings for pregnant people to stop eating seafood and tuna. And all the research, the mercury in the ocean is bioavailable ethyl mercury and methyl mercury. So yes, there is a mercury toxicity problem growing huge around the planet. It's from burning coal.
Thank you, Dr.
It's in the seafood.
We're going to move on to another question.
Next question, thank you.
Excuse me, I'm next. I'm next. Dr. Connett? Dr. Connett, where's Harvard at? What city is it in?
Harvard is in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Okay, and do they have fluoride in the water there?
What's that?
I'm right here. I'm right here.
Oh,
do they have fluoride in the water?
I believe they do, yes.
Yeah, and you've mentioned that all the little articles you've mentioned is the professors from Harvard, just a couple of them. Why have they not removed the fluoride from water there since they're so smart there?
Well, it's a good question. You know, why are academics in general so reluctant to speak on anything except their speciality? Why are they so timid in helping communities face problems like this? How many academics do we have here? How many professors from universities? We have 2, 3. We don't get much activism from our academics, unfortunately.
Doctor.
And that's general, whether it's Harvard or anywhere else.
And I do think that's interesting that you said that, because who was the first city in Arizona to adjust the fluoride to 0.7 part million? Tempe. We're home of ASU, where I graduated with an MBA, and that had the highest concentration of intelligent, highly educated PhDs, and was the first city to make a move in 1973. Phoenix wouldn't do it till 1989.
All right, next question.
Dr. Howard Farran, is it not below the standard of care if you have a patient that's received radiation to the oral cavity to not place them on fluoride trays? Is that not below the standard of care?
Before anybody gets chemotherapy, the first thing they need to do is make sure that they have a dental exam. They don't want any unnecessary infection. We make fluoride trays. I mean, absolutely. Good point.
That's our last question. We're going to wrap this up. I want you guys to join me one last time in thanking these gentlemen for spending their time and informing us. Lastly, a couple of things. We would not have had this opportunity had not a lady got active and decided to allow this forum to happen. So I want to ask Jody, is she gone?
I'm right here.
Jody, would you guys please give her a round of applause? She put this thing together. Out in the lobby, there's a list so that you can leave your contact information, your phone, or your email and name, so that we can get information to you to empower you and inform you. Please drive safely. Thanks for coming out. God bless you.